The great Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor. So, Newt, what do you make of this? Trump was particularly tough on Putin at a presser on the airplane coming home today. How do you see this, Newt?
Look, I think that for some reason, Putin believed that Trump was like Biden or like Obama, that he could push him around, he could lie to him. Much of it's been blatant, where Putin will talk nice in the morning, and that evening they'll bomb, an orphanage or a hospital or a senior citizen home, and somehow we're supposed to be too stupid to realize that we're basically having a Russian dictator who has contempt for us. Well, that's a huge mistake if you do that to Donald Trump, because he's not Obama, he's not Bill Clinton, he's not Joe Biden. And I think what you'll see in the very near future is very dramatic increase in sanctions. And I suspect you're going to see a very significant increase in both the flow of weapons and in targeting accuracy to allow those weapons to be used inside Russia. And I think that President Trump is very reluctant. He did not want to do this. He wanted to find a way to get to peace. He does not want to be involved in wars. But I think he reluctantly concluded that the only thing Putin will respect is overwhelming strength. And frankly, if you need overwhelming strength, Donald Trump's a pretty good guy to have as your president.
So many people talking about the sanctions, secondary sanctions, the tariffs and so forth. But the weaponry that you mentioned, which came out of the NATO meeting, is not as much talked about. But I would think Putin would respect that even more. I just wonder, what is the inside story? I mean, we're helping a military buildup. It's not our boots on the ground, but we're helping a military buildup for Ukraine. Do you think that will matter? Do you think Putin will respect that?
Well, he'll respect it if it begins to hurt him. I mean, look, Putin is a very tough, realistic, KGB-trained policeman. I mean, people need to understand, you didn't get to be a leader in the KGB by being soft or stupid. He hates the United States. He has said all along that the collapse of the Soviet Empire was the greatest disaster of the 20th century, and he desperately wants to rebuild it. Now, the problem he has is he's taking on the entire Western world. All the Europeans have now unified against him, and he's finally pushed President Trump enough that President Trump will do things. And Larry, look, you know much more about this than I do, but my hunch is if you go to very strong secondary boycotts, you can cut off an amazing amount of resources and almost create a heart attack for the Russian economy. If at the same time they start having very sophisticated weapons landing inside Russia, beginning to take apart the Russian military complex, at some point, he's going to have to look at the wall and realize he's not going to win. And the question is, how big a loss does he want to take? And does he agree early, or does he allow the Ukrainians to regain the advantage and allow gradually the Russian people to break up, just because the number of casualties they're going to take if we get serious is going to be terrifying. And I think that it's truly a tragedy that Putin, who really should know better, has now put himself in this position and has not behaved in any way in terms of what the Soviets would have called a correlation of forces. In this fight, if we're serious, he has no forces.
You can bust him financially. You can bust him economically. But two things, Newt, which remain, we don't know. China is very important. Will China obey secondary sanctions? That is so important. And that's tied up with trade talks and a lot of other things with China, as you know well. I don't know what China's going to do. By the way, India is helping Russia also, and some other real countries. But China's the key. The second point is the Europeans are sitting on half of the Russian central bank reserves. It's about $300 billion worth, okay? It's mostly dollars and foreign currencies, and there's a lot of gold. You want to bust them? Break up the reserve. They don't have the courage to do it. The NATO countries, the EU, they control those reserves. We don't. We only have about $5 billion. They got close to $300 billion. That's where you can break them. Those were the Russian family jewels. You take that stuff away, they're finished. I'm telling you, they're finished. You enforce the sanctions and
frankly,
take away the reserves, they're finished. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And frankly, you can give the $300 billion to the Ukrainians.
Yeah, you
But
could.
remember, all this has to be careful because Putin does have 6,000 nuclear weapons.
I understand.
So you've got to be very careful, push him close to the edge, but don't push him over.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now. By the way, what's the book? Trump's Triumph, the great book. What's your new book, Newt? Trump's Triumph? We should have put it up on the full screen.
Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback.
My pleasure. America's greatest philosopher, Newt Gingrich. Thanks for coming on.